Also, members and the viewing public, we don't want to forget all of the work that this committee has done over the last several years as it relates to redistricting. On our website, if you go to the legislators' main page and you click on House page, and there's a button that says Additional Sites. Under that Additional Sites button is a Louisiana redistricting site where we have all the work that this committee has done over the last couple of years. We don't want to have we don't want to forget that hard work, and if anybody needs a resource, there's a lot of resources there. But with that said, so we're going to start off this morning with Ms. Lowry from here in the House and Governmental staff. She's going to update us on some principles with redistricting and kind of get everybody up to speed. So, Ms. Lowry.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Hi, members. My name is Patricia Lowry Dufour. I am the Senior Legislative Analyst for House and Governmental Affairs. I have staffed this committee in some capacity since 1988, and the chairman has asked me to give y'all a brief Redistricting 101 this morning, and it's going to be abbreviated. And again, as the chairman said, there are a plethora of resources available on the redistricting website of the legislature, including links to the videos of the hearings, the roadshow hearings, all public comments and documents that were received there. So again, you are encouraged to go look there.
Anyone watching online, we're working on the technology.
Thank you, Anthony. Thank you. Okay, briefly we'll be giving an overview of redistricting terms, concepts, and law, redistricting criteria, the 2020 census population and population trends, malapportionment statistics and illustrative maps on Congress and the Supreme Court, since those are items included in the call for this special session, and the Act for Congress that was adopted in the 2022 first extraordinary session, as well as the timeline related to the adoption of that act. Okay, briefly, Louisiana's resident population is 4,657,757. This is the number that we use to determine the ideal district. Now, why is this important to you? One of the main criteria for redistricting is to achieve population equality, so among the districts. So the ideal district population is very important. Just so you know, for congressional apportionment, there is a different number that is used. It's called the apportionment population. And Louisiana had an additional 3,711 overseas and uniformed citizens allocated to Louisiana for the apportionment population, which is how Congress uses the method of equal proportions to allocate the number of congressmen to the state. Okay, briefly, in Louisiana, our 2020 census data showed that we grew by 2.74%, while the growth rate of the nation was 7.35, and the southern region growth rate was 10.22. This is key because even though we are showing a population growth, we are lagging behind both the nation and the state. And just keep in mind that the nation grew at its lowest rate since 1940. This is a map that shows the historical population trends in the state of Louisiana. And while you can see that there were some decade differences, so clearly we had significant population growth from 1990 to 2000. There were trends such as what you see in the 2000s to 2010, which were the effects of Hurricanes Katrina and Rita on our coastal and Orleans metro areas. But what I also want to tell you is this is important because, again, even though the state grew in each of these decades, when I first started working for this committee in the late 80s, we had 8 congressmen allocated to this state. So in the 1980 to 90, we had 8. Following the 1990 census, we were dropped to 7. And then we maintained 7 from 2000 to 2010, and again then we dropped another congressman. So what you see is a pattern is emerging that every other decade, even though the state is growing, because we are lagging behind the nation, we are losing our number allocated to us for Congress. So specifically with the 2020 census, you will see there is growth in the state among really the I-10-12 corridor. There is loss in North Louisiana generally, although there are a few spots of growth. And, there are areas of our coast that are clearly suffering population losses. So why is this important? Obviously, when the districts were drawn in 2010, the population, was substantially equal or equal to the extent practicable in all the districts. Over the decade, you can see because of the shifts in population, it necessitated a change in the district boundaries. Now, our census population demographic change. In 2010, you can see there we had 62.56% of people who identified as single race white, 32.8% of people who identified as black, and we had 1.8% of people who identified as Asian, 1.3% that identified as American Indian, and 1.83% as other. And one thing I want to point out about this chart is Hispanic is an ethnicity. So when you look at these numbers across the board, they will not total to 100 because you can be any of these races and also Hispanic, okay? So Hispanic is separately reported as a number, and we had 4.25% Hispanic in 2010. That number has increased to 6.92 in 2020. The white population is 57.06, the black population 33.13, Asian 2.30, American Indian 1.87, and again, the other, you'll see the most significant growth in the other category. The some other race is interesting because it's not, these are people who chose to respond to the census as being not white, not black, not Asian, not American Indian, okay? So it's just an interesting jump to see this increase.
Yeah, Ms. Lowry, also just to kind of point out, if members look at the decrease in the white population and look at the increase in the other population, they're pretty close to the same from a number standpoint. Just I don't know if it's more people. We had talked about this in committee over the last couple of years. If it's more people identifying as other with mixed races, but just to kind of point that out for you all.
Right, and I do want to point out that we so. This will tell you how the census reports the population to the state. So every person in the state can respond in a single race or any combination of 6 races. And so there are, you can respond that you are white, black, African American. You could be all 6, okay? And you can respond to the census that way. But in order for y'all to be able to analyze reports, and we've included some reports from Act 6, which was the congressional act that y'all adopted. And if you flip to this page called Total Population, it's numbered page 9 in your packet. And I just want to talk about it just a little bit so that y'all will become familiar, because tomorrow, as we are hearing bills, you'll need to be familiar with these reports. So each report will have a total population figure, will have white. So in order, your predecessors on this committee and the Joint Senate Committee adopted a population allocation document that is available on the redistricting website. And so the white population number that you see on this report indicates white alone. So this is not going to be any person that reported that they were white in any other race. The black category reflects all people who reported black alone plus any other race and black. Okay? Asian is Asian alone and any other race other than black, okay? And total American Indian, the same. American Indian alone and any other race other than Asian or Black. And the other is that category that we talked about, the people who reported that they were any other, and it also includes the Pacific Islanders, that the population in Louisiana was not significant, so that is included in the other category. And the category that's labeled VAP total, that means voting age population. And that's going to be key, as you will hear, I'm sure, from our Attorney General. Okay, moving on. Any questions about that? All right. Yes, sir.
Hold on, let me, is it Carter?
If you
All right,
reported,
Representative Carter, you on?
thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you reported white and you is any other only white is counted or
The white population category on your reports is people who responded to the census as being white alone,
white alone?
not combination with any other race.
Okay.
Okay?
So basically the same way with the black population is
No, sir.
okay. So,
So
go back to that, 'cause I'm
on the
missing-
report, and again, this population allocation document is on the website, and it was adopted by the committee when we started the process. So the black population category is people who reported to the census that they were black and any other race.
Okay.
Okay? So they could be a combination of up to the 6.
I got you.
Okay?
Thank you, Representative Carter. And members, also, just to let y'all know, I know some of this room this technology is new to some of y'all. The buttons on your desk, the one to the left is dead. There's nothing on it. So if you want to be recognized, please hit the button towards your right, and you'll see your microphone light up when it's your turn. Representative Gadberry for a question. Give me a second. It's giving me a little trouble here. All right, you're on.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So when we proportion a district, we go by voting age population and not total population?
No, sir. So the population of the district that is keyed into the ideal district population is the total population of the district.
Okay, so what's the significance of voting age population then if we,
That is the population that is 18 or over, and it is significant when you're analyzing voting rights issues, because obviously the people who are 18 or over are of voting age.
right, so I guess the question is that I've always come up with is, and I'm just taking, say, District 1 here, it shows 69% is white on total population and 71% on voting age population.
Sir?
So when we proportion, or when we come up with a district, do we go by the percentage based on total population or voting age population?
To achieve the population equality required on the districts, you go by population. To achieve other goals, you look at the totality of the circumstances, including voting age population. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
You did
Okay.
that well, Ms. Lowry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What is redistricting? I will tell you the terms apportionment and districting are sometimes used interchangeably. In fact, in our state constitution, the term reapportionment is used. However, they are different concepts. Apportionment is the process of allocating seats in a legislature, while districting is the process of drawing lines to create geographical territories from which officials are elected. So again, we talked about the apportionment of numbers of members of Congress to each state. That is allocating seats to the state in Congress. Whereas what the charge before you under the call for the special session is to draw lines for the geographic territories from which those officials will be elected. Why do you redistrict? Well, there are many, many, many legal requirements involving redistricting, as we briefly touched on with Representative Gadberry just a moment ago. One includes Article 3, Section 6 of our Constitution that includes deadlines and duties regarding legislative redistricting. There are also various statutes for your local governing bodies and school boards to conduct redistrictings, and as well as deadlines. And then there are some general legal requirements, including the Equal Protection Clause and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. So, given that, who are you responsible for redistricting? Congress, the courts, the House and the Senate, the Public Service Commission, and the State Board of Elementary and Secondary Education. All those have been enacted by the state legislature as laws. So it takes a bill. The issues dealing with federal law, right? So equal population. You know, you hear often the term one man, one vote. You know, so how do you measure it? Again, you measure it by looking at the ideal population. And again, how do we come up with that ideal population? We take the total resident population of the state or the geographic area where the districts are to be confected, and you divide that total population by the number of districts, and you come up with an ideal district population. So I'm going to refer you now to the plan statistic document that's in your folder. It's numbered 8. And again, this is all relevant to Act 5 of the 2022 First Extraordinary Session. So this report, and again, I encourage you to become familiar with the structure of it and what it is telling you. So this will tell you there are 6 districts in a congressional plan. They are single-member districts. The actual population within the district, the ideal population that you are basing the calculation to determine your deviation off of. And so you can see there that the absolute deviation ranges from negative 24 to positive 41 for an overall deviation of 65 people between all 6 districts, and a relative mean deviation of 0.00 and overall range of 0.01.
Ms. Lowry, if you don't
Yes, sir.
mind, just for a question, if we drew, since we're going to, one of the maps we're going to be talking about is Congress, and we were out of, the deviation was 1.5%, which on the legislative maps, that's well within deviation range. What would 1.5% or 2% do for Congress? Is that allowable? Is there, what's the wiggle room there?
So the courts have clearly established that strict population equality among congressional districts has to be the overriding objective. Now, that said, however, there have also been some deviations that have been okay in certain states, provided the state has an overriding reason for it that is rational and non-discriminatory.
So we want to be as close to 0 as we can.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Okay. Everybody clear on population equality and deviations? Okay. And as the chairman alluded to, the standards are different between Congress and other representative districts that we draw. They are based on different legal provisions. Congress, the nearly as equal in population as practicable, is based on jurisprudence. Westbury v. Sanders is the seminal case there, based on Article 1, Section 2, and the 14th Amendment. Representatives shall be apportioned among the states according to their respective numbers, and you must make a good faith effort to avoid deviation and to be able to provide a legally acceptable, non-discriminatory justification for any deviation. Whereas for other representative districts that you will draw, you are allowed to have a slightly larger deviation field. It is substantial equality of population among various districts. That derives from the case of Reynolds versus Sims. Again, the 1960s created a lot of cases dealing with population equality as well as requirements for single-member districts. Again, based on the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment, there's a generally accepted 10% standard that a legislative plan with an overall range of less than 10% would not be enough to make a prima facie case of invidious discrimination under the 14th Amendment. However, so asterisk, it is not necessarily a safe harbor. In Larios versus Cox, any substantial deviation must have a legitimate state interest behind it. Okay. In Louisiana, in order to accomplish this overall 10% range, we have adopted a criteria of plus or minus 5 from the ideal to stay as close to that ideal population among the districts as you can get. Okay, again, and I know this seems like it's very repetitive. It's important. Equality of population must be the overriding objective of districting, and deviations from the principle are permissible only if incident to the effectuation of a rational state policy, which would include allowing representation to political subdivisions, compactness, preserving cores of prior districts, and avoiding contests between incumbents. And again, that is based on Reynolds versus Sims. Okay, judicial districts, which again will be the subject of the special session. In a Louisiana case, Wells versus Edwards, that was decided in the Middle District of Louisiana, the court decided that the one-person, one-vote standard does not apply to judicial districts, as judges serve the people. They do not represent the people. Okay, now we're going to talk about other issues of federal law. Discrimination against minorities. The Voting Rights Act of 1965, and again, principles of this are contained within the 14th and 15th Amendment, but basically Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act prohibits the state or any political subdivision from imposing a voting qualification standard, practice, or procedure that results in the denial or abridgment of any citizen's right to vote on account of race, color, status as a member of a language minority group. So, there have been a lot of litigation on this issue. Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act was amended in 1982 to clarify that a violation of Section 2 is established if, based on the totality of circumstances, it is shown that election processes are not equally open to participation by members of a protected class, in that its members have less opportunity than other members of the electorate to participate in the political process and elect representatives of their choice. So there was a case, Thornburg versus Jingles, 1986, that established certain preconditions that courts will look to make determinations on violations of the Voting Rights Act. They are size and geographical compactness of the group. It requires that the population be sufficiently large and geographically compact to constitute a majority in a single-member district, that the minority population is politically cohesive, and that in the absence of special circumstances, block voting by the majority defeats the minority's preferred candidates. Once courts have established those preconditions, there are other objective factors that it looks to determine the totality of the circumstances. And I'm not going to go into those at this moment, but if you would like to talk later, we'll be happy to do that. Now, the other side of that is racial gerrymandering. So again, the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment found, there have been a series of cases, Reno versus Shaw in Louisiana, the Hayes lines of cases, where the courts have found that if race was found to be the predominant overriding factor, that strict scrutiny on the state's plan would apply. And in order to survive that strict scrutiny, the plan must have been narrowly tailored to serve a compelling state interest. So what would be a compelling state interest? Remedying past discrimination, avoiding retrogression, avoiding violations of Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. And key here is those interests must be strongly supported in the evidence when the policymakers are making their decisions on the plan. And this would apply not only to plans that distinguish citizens because of race, but also to plans that may be race neutral, but on their face are inexplicable except on grounds other than race.
Ms. Lauer, we have a question. Representative Marcel?
Thank you. Can you go back over what you just said about the strict scrutiny and how that's overridden? Or why would that be overridden? So I know you talked about the
No,
idea
I
of
think
population,
it's
and I'm
satisfied.
so it has to be
That
satisfied.
if you can prove that that the plan was narrowly tailored to further your compelling governmental interest,
And what would be an example of that?
remedying past discrimination, avoiding retrogression, avoiding violations of Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. And again, all those things must be firmly established on the record as you are making your decisions on a plan.
So, in essence, I'm new on the committee, so you got to bring me up to speed. So in essence, if a bill is proposed and these criterias aren't met, what you're saying is during the argument of the bill, they have to be laid out, or they should be laid out? Is that what the law says?
Okay, this is based on jurisprudence, not necessarily the letter of the law. But two, I think because y'all were elected to represent your districts in the state of Louisiana, and y'all are the policymakers of the state of Louisiana. And so, as you're making the policy, I think it's important that as you're presenting, because individually you are alone have the right to present your bill, right?
Right.
And I think it's important for your colleagues to understand the reasons why, because you're asking them to vote or to vote for your bill. And I think that would be on any bill that you present. And, what is the policy behind your legislation? Why is it important?
Well, I understand, that each of us have to, when we present a bill, talk about how it's important to us or our districts. But we also have to take into account of the laws that are set and the criteria that we need to meet. So when we don't do that, then we find ourselves in court like we are now.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Marcel.
And one other thing I want to say is the courts are very aware that redistricting plans are not drawn in a vacuum. They understand that this is a environment, a political environment, that y'all have awareness of many factors. So just want to put that on. All right, redistricting criteria. The legislature adopted in the 21 regular session Joint Rule 21. So this is the criteria, and copies of this rule, members, are in your packets. And this is important because this is a standards that the legislature has adopted for consideration of redistricting plans. So what are we talking about? Compliance with the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment, the 15th Amendment, Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, all other applicable federal and state law. That all redistricting plans must be composed of contiguous geography. Does anybody have a question about that? Okay. Contain whole VTDs. So that is the census term for election precincts to the extent practicable, and a limitation on the number of divisions that can be used in a precinct if they have to be split. All redistricting plans have to respect established boundaries of parishes, municipalities, but that is subordinate and not used to undermine maintenance of communities of interest within the same district to the extent practicable. We must use the most recent census data, that is the redistricting data file, the PL 94-171 data released by the census, as it is validated through our data verification program. If a member of the public wishes to submit a plan, they must submit it electronically in a comma-delimited block equivalency file. The purpose for this, members, is so we can import it into our system and be able to produce the reports that you're going to be used to seeing. Each redistricting plan for the House and the Senate, PSC, BESI, Congress, and the Supreme Court must be a whole plan which assigns all the geography of the state. Now, why is this? Well, I can tell you what. After many decades of drawing districts, I can tell you I can draw a single perfect district every day, all day. But drawing 105 or 39 or even 6 is much more difficult. And you have to, again, consider the totality of the circumstances there. So we require, you can't just submit the perfect district. You must submit a whole plan. Each redistricting plan for the House, Senate, PSC, and BESI must contain single-member districts, contain districts substantially equal in population, and that, again, is that plus or minus 5% from the ideal. Must give due consideration to traditional district alignments to the extent practicable. For Congress, again, single-member districts, and contain districts with as nearly equal to the ideal district population as practicable. Okay, let's talk about what we've got. So when the 2020 census came in and was reported to the state, and again, this was a unique year for the census, they were seriously behind in reporting the data to the states, and they also employed a new privacy metric, the differential privacy, which has been a challenge. But anyway, the census data is considered the gold standard for data to use for redistricting. So in 2010, the ideal population for congressional districts was 755,562. That increased by over 20,000 to 776,292 following the 2020 census. Why is this important? Well, here is the map of the prior congressional districts before the redistricting cycle following the 2020 census. This is the malapportionment. So what does that mean? That is the number by which the districts, both each individual district and the overall plan, deviate from the ideal. And as you can see, there is substantial deviation. There is a difference of 88,120 between congressional district number 4 and congressional district number 6. And as a reminder, congressional districts have to be as close to equal in population as possible. Therefore, the legislature had to act to redraw the districts. I call this the heat map. This shows the dark orange, reddish color are deviations with that are furthest below the ideal. The lighter orange is still below the ideal. The light yellow colors are population that is above, but obviously District 6 was the most above the ideal district. So, to remedy the population inequality among the districts, the legislature passed a bill. That bill was introduced on February 1st. It was reported favorably by your predecessor committee on February 4th, 2022. It passed the House 70 votes to 33 nays on the 10th. It was received in the Senate on the 14th. The Senate Governmental Affairs Committee reported it on the 15th. The Senate passed it 27 to 10 on the 18th. The House concurred in amendments, 62 yeas to 27 nays on the 18th. Then it was sent to the governor. On March the 10th, the governor vetoed the bill. On May the 30th, the House overrode the veto, 72 yeas to 31 nays. On March 30th, the Senate also overrode the veto, 27 yeas to 11 nays. And on March 31st, the bill became Act Number 5 of the 2022 First Extraordinary Session. This bill, Act 5, is this map represents the districts that were drawn pursuant to Act 5. And this is the map that, again, is in litigation currently. This is the population, again, statistics, the deviations. You've looked at the report. I don't need to repeat that to you, but you can see that they are as nearly equal in population, and certainly much more equal in population than where we started. Malapportionment of the Supreme Court, and we're talking about this again because it is in the special session. These are the current districts for the 7 Supreme Court districts. These districts, while not subject to equal population requirements due to that case that we mentioned earlier, when these districts were last drawn in 1997 using the 1990 census, okay, so they were drawn in 1997 using 1990 census figures. The legislature did draw them with substantially equal populations, and in fact, the mean deviation was less than 2% among the districts. The ideal district population at that time was 602,853. This, members, shows you this current state of the deviations among each of the Supreme Court districts. District 1, I'm just going to say the population of the districts vary considerably from a low of 476,554 in District Number 7, which is an Orleans and Jefferson-based district, to a high of 838,610 in District 5, which is the Baton Rouge Metropolitan-based district, a difference among the districts of more than 362,000 people.
Ms. Lauer, just the original districts, they were built in the 20s. Is that correct? And only changed once, if my memory serves.
Changed once, I believe 21. Supreme Court districts were established.
Yeah, let me since we're in the 20s again, like we're talking the 1920s.
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes. Back before, I believe, anyone in this room had yet made an appearance.
Yeah, Representative Thompson may have been in the legislature, but that's it.
He certainly has more seniority than anyone in the legislature. Whether or not he was actually here in the 20s, we'd have to ask. But yes, so again, and here's that heat map showing the population deviations, dark red, dark orange, furthest below the ideal, and then dark green representing population the furthest above the ideal.
Ms. Lauer, we have a question. Representative Weibel.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Lowry, thank you for all of this information. It's very helpful. I'm still trying to wrap my head around how the census is counting population, what we talked about earlier. So if a respondent checked white and Asian, that respondent would be counted as?
Okay, the census reported all of those population figures to the state, okay?
Right.
So if you really want to know who reported themselves, not who, but numbers, who reported themselves as white and Asian, we can certainly provide that to you. However, and I just want to say, there's a limited space on reports. And in order for you to be able to analyze voting rights issues, and we have a document on our website, and it was a kind of guidance from the Justice Department, the United States Justice Department, about analyzing Section 2, guidance for that, where you really look at, one, the population of alone, so who reported single race, and then you would allocate to the protected class minority groups, the white plus the minority group, as well as any other reporting. So you would look at it like that. So for simplicity and to basically allow y'all to look at, categories of population, this is how the reports are confected. But the census reports hundreds of categories of racial populations, and they'll tell you, it's like white alone, white plus black, white plus Asian, white plus black plus Asian plus other. All those things will be reported by the census. But for simplicity, there's no way for y'all to look at a report because it would be hundreds of columns of data.
But that criteria is regarded equally regardless of what they check off, I guess is what I'm trying to find out. If they were white only, they're counted as white, but if they're white and another, then they're counted as other. But if they check off black and others, then we count them a part of our black population. Is that correct?
Right, and that's based on that guidance.
From the federal government?
Yes, sir.
Is that guidance been, I don't know if this is a fair question or not, was that similar guidance in 2020 compared to 2010?
Yes.
Has it always been that way?
Similar guidance.
All right. Thank you.
No, you're very welcome. Okay,
Thank you,
well, that
Representative
concludes my presentation, unless there's any other questions.
Thank you, Ms. Lauer. Representative Gadberry does have a question. Representative Gadberry?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to make this clear, what was the ruling from the judge against the maps that were submitted? I assume we
Representative
submitted.
Gadberry, we do have the Attorney General here today to address those issues regarding the litigation. And I think it would be much more appropriate coming from the Chief Legal Officer of the state.
I figured that would be your answer. We submitted Act 5, though, right? This one?
Act 5
That's
was
what
adopted by
submitted-
the legislature.
That's what we submitted to the judge.
Well, the judge was looking at it
Yep.
as part of the litigation.
Right.
Okay.
That's the one that she looked at, though, that she
Well, I mean,
rejected.
and also there have been other plans
Okay.
that have been submitted by plaintiffs to the court.
And would you say that Act 5 did not meet the redistricting criteria?
Representative Gadberry,
I know you're
that
not.
is a legal matter that is currently the subject of litigation in the Middle District, and again, much more appropriately addressed by our Chief Legal Officer.
We're going to let our Attorney General handle that one.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.